Well, let's start. David, why don't you start to us off again with your reading?
Okay, I will be happy to do that. And Rabbi, welcome back and welcome home.
Thank you. Nice to see everyone.
Yeah. Okay, earlier this week was the 22nd of November, which was 59 years after the assassination of President Kennedy. So for my quotation today, I'm going to quote from a speech that he gave on when he got an honorary degree at the American University in June of 1963. He said, and God, I loved his speeches. I loved his wit. He says, for in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures. And we are all mortal. Thank you. And back to you, Marty.
Thank you, David. Rabbi, before we start, also, I want to ask you, how was the trip?
It's over.
I know.
Right. Which is bittersweet. Bittersweet. We were ready to come home, but it was a lovely trip. People bonded very nicely. The Arizona people, the Michigan people. We saw a light. It was a very ambitious itinerary, and some people found that their stamina level wasn't quite what they thought it might be. I don't know if the word had passed around that Tom Clancy tested positive for COVID early in the trip, and they had to kind of stay locked into their hotel for a number of days. But it was very, very nice. People enjoyed it. We had a good time. The weather, we only had about 1 hour of rain, and for that 1 hour, 45 minutes of it, we were inside anyway. So it was lovely.
Very good. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Our opening prayer, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. I'll get to you, Michael. Let me finish with this.
Yeah.
Did you have something important to say?
You did. Why don't you say the prayer and I'll say what I want to say.
Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
And
Michael,
so,
what did you want to mention?
yeah, I wanted to address what the rabbi just mentioned, and he said he asked how the trip to Israel was, and he said it's over. Well, I would like to say this, that going to Israel is like Torah reading. When you come to the end of the Torah, you really don't. You start right from the beginning. So I would say that the trip is not over. It's just looking forward to right very quickly to the next one, whenever that will be. And that's how I wanted to say that.
Okay. Very nice.
I appreciate that, Michael.
Yeah.
Well, we are currently on Exodus 28, verse.
Marty, can I just
Yes, sure.
because I saw Marcia just turned away. When Marcia comes back, I have to pass on a message to her.
Oh, okay. So you can
Sorry.
interrupt me if I'm looking down at the book. We
Okay.
are on Exodus 28, verse 39. Okay. And if someone would like to read verse 39.
Hey, I'd be happy to get started.
Sure.
And thou shalt weave the tussle in. I'm finding it hard to read this. Thou shalt weave
The
and thou
tunic.
shalt weave the music.
Tun-
Maybe someone else should read it. I'm having a little trouble reading this morning.
Okay. David, is your sugar okay?
I think so. Let me see if I can do this again.
Okay,
And thou shalt weave the tunic in cheaper work of 5. Oh, no, I can't do this. Someone else should read it.
okay. You may want to double check your sugar because of the visual aspect there.
I could do it. I
Just-
could handle this, I think.
Okay, please, Michael.
You shall make the fringed tunic of fine linen. You shall make the headdress of fine linen. You shall make the sash embroidered work.
Okay, what what are we what are we describing here?
Linen, but with everything that has been made so far has been made with linen, and to
Okay, it's okay.
um, well,
It's Marcia's phone. Just
I
if
can turn it off.
well, what have we been talking about? And I did that purposefully to we've been talking about what over the past year, over the past week, a week ago. Trying to refresh people's memories first. Yes, Don.
Well, we've been talking about all the instructions for the construction and the adornments and accoutrements surrounding the tabernacle.
What about your feet?
And so this is more detail on.
Okay. Well, last week we were talking about the clothing that the priest would wear.
No, we have to move.
Okay.
I can hear us.
And so as a result, this is sort of the fringed tunic. Who is going to be wearing this fringed tunic?
Aaron, the high priest.
The high priest, right? Correct. Thank you, Rabbi. If you go online, you will see lots of different
After this number.
pictures, if you will, so that you can see what different people have said about this. Okay, because each artist has their own interpretation, and over the ages there have been numerous interpretations. So just to let you know, and then it says headdress of fine linen. We're going to get into some more detail about that. And we're going to also make a sash of embroidered work. But there's no description of the embroidered work. Have you noticed that all of the fine detail is leaving room for the artisans to do their work? We spoke about the craftsmanship several times this past month. Yes, Don.
Well, that's certainly true, Marty, but I'm wondering if the linen is done on a loom. And I assume it is. I assume that the linen is woven on a loom, in which case it would be very difficult to describe how to execute a pattern on a loom, because it depends on the type of loom and the warp and the woof of the threads, and I can understand why there's no more. It doesn't go any deeper than that.
Does a loom do embroidery at the same time, or
No.
is it just a pattern woven into the linen material itself?
I guess it's just the pattern in the weave.
Yeah.
Embroidery, you're right, would be done
Yes.
as a next stage. Yeah.
Okay. So I just find it that so we're restating what we had discussed before, that this is also a communal project. It's not just one person doing all the work. It is a large group of people doing this, because there are a lot of people that have to be robed. Okay. Any other comments before we go on to verse 40?
Yes.
Marcia,
Oh, Marcia, yes, Marcia.
Okay, so at one time in my life, I was a big weaver.
Excuse me, Marcia, could you move closer to the
Yes.
microphone?
One time in my life, I was a big weaver. Now I don't have a big enough house for a big loom, but I still do a little. Anyway, so I guess I've read this because it took me to start making talesum. And I took those three colors and I wove them into lines because it looked like everybody had the lines in their talesum. So I used those three, and the fringes were there for that you made the tzitzits, also had them at times. So I think that this was written for me, how I should make talesum. Okay?
Thank
That's
you,
my
thank
thought for
you,
the day.
thank you. Yes, Don?
Yeah, I would just add, I have a friend who is a heavy-duty weaver, and her loom broke, a big loom, about 8 feet wide, and she couldn't afford to fix it. So using the internet, I figured out how it all worked and fixed it. So I learned a lot about weaving from doing that job. It is really complex.
It is.
My hat is off to anybody who churns out woven material from those devices, gets everything even and lined up. One other quick thing, if I may, I just switched to the Orthodox Jewish translation of the text,
Okay,
and it makes it more difficult for me because every other word is the Hebrew transliteration. But I'm just wondering, the last line we read was verse 39. And in this translation, the term is embroidered caissones of fine linen. Would that be the correct Hebrew for the?
Say it again, Don?
This translation said, it's supposed to be the Orthodox Jewish translation. And thou shalt embroider the caissones of fine linen, and thou shalt make the mitznepet of fine linen, and thou shalt make the avnet of artistic embroidery.
Yeah, they're just not translating those words. Those are the Hebrew words for the turban, the headdress, the sash, whatever. Yeah.
Thank you. I just needed to calibrate, make sure I was reading the right thing here.
Right.
okay.
And I think you probably pointed it out last week or whenever, Marty, that those are the same terms that we use for some of the accoutrements of the Torah scroll, when we dress the Torah.
Very good. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
Boker Tov and Shabbat Shalom. I want to go back because as I opened the book, it came to, I paid attention to it. And if we look on verse 37, and you put it on a ptil chelet, here in the Tirgum you put it on a cord of turquoise. Now, the word ptil chelet, the cord that it's not turquoise, it's a light blue, is one that we attach to the talit, the tallis. One of the corners is blue, probably not in the in the modern talitot, it doesn't appear, but it's the exact words, ptil chelet. And I won't go into how they found that color because it's complicated. but it's the same word, and that's what drew my attention to that.
Thank you. Yes, Rabbi
Okay, let me pick
Norman.
up on what Rabbi Miri was said. One of the definitions of when it's still light as opposed to dusk and into dark is so that if you're looking at those shades of blue, that if you can tell the difference between them. If you can't tell the difference, then it's obviously too dark and it's already evening time. But if you can still tell the difference between the different shades, because they have, as Miri was saying, they have different names for the blue, then it's still daytime and you can still say your afternoon prayers.
Okay. Very good. I was unaware of that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments before we read on the next line? Okay, Michael, would you care to read verse 40 and 41? Michael, I think you're muted.
Yeah. And for Aaron's sons also you shall make tunics and make sashes for them and make turbans for them, for the dignitaries and dignity and adornment. Put these on your brothers. Put these on your brother Aaron and on your son, on his sons as well. Anoint them and adorn them and consecrate them to serve me as priests.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any comments here? Yes, Rabbi Mary.
I'm going to be in the future, not too long, in the future of the story that goes on. It's important, I think, for us. And again, you know, you can read the Torah a million times, and so I'm just seeing this here. What it says, it's, you know, the word Mashiach is someone that was anointed. And here, what we see is that the clothing of Aaron and his sons are anointed with oil. And we should remember that in a future story about the sons of Aaron. I don't want to give it away, but
Yes.
that they were covered with oil.
Okay. It's important. I understand what you're
Very,
getting at
yeah.
for sure. Sure. Any other comment? So I just want to add on a little bit to Rabbi Miri, because it is for Aaron and his sons. It is a very important concept. It's not just the high priest, but also the lineage that will be doing this of priests. Any other comments to be made here? And I found it interesting also in verse 41 that the Aaron and the priests are being consecrated to serve God himself. Any comments about that?
I think the comment, it's pretty well explained in verse 42 that we'll be getting to in a moment, actually.
Okay. Well, it just it took me by surprise that this phrase comes up quite frequently, to serve me as priests or to serve me. Okay. So it's going to be, they're going to be doing the rituals and giving what's in the ritual to God. Okay, they're sort of going to be, and it's going to come up in a short while, a lot of the different rituals that they will have to go through. And it's going to be repeated again and again, but the priest is the one who's going to be spoken about. There will also be sacrifices that people can make, and that will come up later too. But for the most important ritual services, the priests have to be anointed and holy, made holy constantly. Yes, Rabbi Norman.
Well, kind of in response to your question, Marty, although I can't attribute it to any particular commentator, but the kings and judges were also not I should say they were also anointed. They weren't consecrated. They were anointed, and that was their ceremony of becoming official and having their title. But they didn't serve God. They
Right.
served the people.
People.
So I think the emphasis here, that what you're trying to point out, is that this particular ceremony, this particular ordination, was of those who would be installed and blessed and consecrated just to be serving God. That was their ultimate, or that was their priority in the system, to serve God and not to answer to the people.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for finding the better words. I appreciate that. So any other comments about that verse? Okay, let's read verse 42.
Okay, I think I'm ready to give it another shot.
Okay.
And thou shalt make them linen breeches to cover the flesh of their nakedness. I'll go all the way back to Adam. From the loins even unto the thighs they shall reach, and they shall be upon Aaron and upon his sons when they go in unto the tent of meeting, or when they come near unto the altar to minister to the holy place, that they bear not iniquity and die. It shall be it'll be something forever unto him,
A law, yes.
a loss forever unto him, and unto his and after him.
Okay. So David mentioned that it reminded him a little bit of the book of Genesis, and when Adam and Eve realize that they're naked, and then they decide they want to cover themselves up. There's some very interesting ideas that come to mind. Where else do we hear about covering their nakedness or his nakedness?
Lot. No, there's I think it's in the Lot we see that, and at Noah.
And
Noah, yes, Noah.
Yeah.
What does Ham do? He's one of the sons. And then what does Seth, and I forget the other brother's name.
No, not Seth, Shem.
Ham, Shem, and Noah.
It's Shem. There's Ham, Shem, and Shem is
Yaphet.
Japheth. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. So what does Ham do? He sees Noah's nakedness, and then what does he do?
He covers him and he steps backward not to see it.
That's Seth.
I mean, he stands with his back to him.
That's Seth and Japheth.
Shem, not
Shem,
Shem.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Shem. I had it's Shem and Japheth. They're the ones that turn their back and walk backwards to cover Noah. Okay? So that nobody sees the nakedness. That they don't see his nakedness. Who is Ham? Who's his son? Canaan.
Edom.
Canaan. Okay, the land of Canaan. Okay, or Canaan. And think about one of the reasons why we are going to say that the Canaanites were doing bad things. The foundation for that may have originated with Ham. Yes, Rabbi.
On the other hand, this is a special for Michael. The word Shem is what in Hebrew we call anti-Shem, against Shem. Anti-Semitism comes from the word Shem. So we're a descendant of that one. So when we talk, Michael, about anti-Semitism, it's interesting that the word comes from so far away as one of the children of Noah.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Anti-Shemi. In Hebrew is anti-Semite is anti-Shemi, against, oh, yeah.
Very interesting. So here we see how one little story gets picked up again because as we read here, it's to cover the linen breeches are being made to cover their nakedness, and it says it shall extend from the hips to the thighs. And then there are other discussions about why this was very important, so that by being clothed that way, they would not their nakedness would not be exposed to the, if you will, the congregation. Okay.
I always thought that it was funny. The issue is that he had to go up. And if you go up and you don't wear underwear, then you can see the nakedness, which we're talking about the private. So to think about it was very clever. But we learned that probably the other people did not wear that. So everyone else had like a tunic or something. But for him, because he climbs up and is the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, it's important that you won't see it.
Well, this brings to mind several things that we've been reading over the past several weeks. And this is thrown into the mix. What we've been reading about seems to be trying to keep our focus at, if I were attending a service led by those priests, I would be focused on the priest and what the movements of the priest, what the priest is wearing when they approach the ark, and they, and everything. It's a dignified process. What would happen if, whether there was a blemish, something wasn't made right, or a part of their body was exposed? How would you feel if something like that happened on the Bema today?
Wardrobe malfunction.
Wardrobe. We have all kinds of different things, but the focus is on the purity of everything, the it's a holy ritual. Something as simple as that can distract people from the actual ritual. Just like any other blemish or any other, tear or everything. It's a very holy and dignified activity that's going to be done here, including all of the animal sacrifices, the way the bread is being used. And believe me, I agree with Don and Gail. This is so many animals that are going to be used in the rituals. It's very difficult to do. That's all I'm going to say there. Any other comments? Well, did anyone notice something in all these weeks that we've been reading about the priestly garments? Any absence? Yes, Marcia.
They don't say anything about what Moses should wear.
Very good. This is strictly for the priests. Now, I don't know if this is to suggest that Moses, to let us realize Moses is not a priest, because this is directed specifically to the priests themselves. I don't know. Rabbi Murray and Rabbi Norman, any ideas about that?
I think it affirms it's something that even today in most cultures, those who have specific roles to play. I mean, the judge puts on a judicial robe. Clergy in many
Yes.
denominations, liberal Judaism has kind of gotten away from that, but that's how you identify someone, especially from far away. Oh, he's the one wearing the black robe. He's the one wearing that particular hat. The chazan in a traditional congregation, cantor wears a big, maybe not a top hat necessarily, but almost a crown type. And you say, oh, that's the cantor, as opposed to something else. So I think that's what it has to do. But also, again, remember that a lot of the Torah, the text in this part of Exodus and certainly into Leviticus, is going to be what they call the P source, and is going to be emphasizing how important the priests were, if not even more important than Moses at this stage of the game.
Yes.
In the development of the people and their wandering.
Okay. Very good. Any other comments? Thank you, Rabbi.
Moses is still only a shepherd, but Aaron is the high priest.
Okay. Now, here's another question about that. Is the fact that Aaron is going to be the high priest because he's a good spokesperson? Moses is not the best speaker for different reasons that have been cited before? Is that one because does that have anything to do with it? When Moses doesn't want to take, he's trying to come up with all kinds of excuses not to do what God tells him to do at the burning bush. He says, why don't you, think about my brother? And, and God does choose Aaron as the spokesperson. Yes, Don.
Aaron's the firstborn.
Yes.
He's the older brother. He's the one who normally should take charge.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, Don.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Rabbi Norman just said, looking at it in terms of function, Moses has the direct connection to God, all along. And he's also the general in terms of military operations and the operations to lead the people to the desert. So Aaron, as priest, I'm not sure exactly how you would define his function, except to the formality of the worship services. But it's Moses who really has the spiritual connection direct to people. So I'd like to hear from somebody who knows a lot more than I do about this. What the difference between the channel to God and how and what the priests do.
Okay, that's a great question. We've addressed part of it before. Any comments from anyone?
We call Moshe Navi, prophet. He has a completely different task, and he disappears as soon as they get to Canaan. And we talk about the high priest in the temple that's much, much later. So if you want to be secular, you can explain those things. We can go to Drash that Rabbi Norman probably know more than I do, or explanation on that. But it's interesting. I mean, all those clothing Aaron wears really mainly when the temple exists rather than in the tent of meeting. That's my take.
All right. Any other comments? Yes, David.
Yeah, it's possible that they're trying to make a comparison between the priestly appearance of Aaron with the very different and personal appearance of Moses. They had very different relationships with God, it seems to me. Moses was a really personal one, whereas his brother, that did not have that personal one as much, was able to assume the role of a priest.
Okay. It's interesting. What comes to mind is the concept of separation of church and state. So anyway, any other comments? Yes, Marcia.
is it possible that we never know of Moses's children who will take on the job? What job will they take? And maybe God wants it to be in the line of the tradition instead of having children take over who aren't Jewish in his mind.
Interesting. Did you want to expand on that?
No, I don't have an answer.
Okay.
But it just seems to me that now it's even to this day, the oldest child is the oldest child, with quotes, and then the next child. But now, since Moses' children aren't in this at all, maybe this is the beginning of it, that God has said, your children now also have responsibilities.
Okay. Very good. Any other comment? Yes, Don.
This may be not a good analogy, but in modern corporate life, you've got a chief executive officer, a CEO, who who literally executes the corporate policy and organizes all the people in the organization. And then you've got the chairman who has the direct connection to the shareholders, but
That's a good way of putting it.
doesn't actually do anything, but the will of the shareholders comes down from on high to the chairman, and then the CEO has to get it done. So I kind of see a vague metaphor there in this situation.
Another one, right.
Okay. Yes, Rabbi Norman.
Yeah, I would just jump in with the notion that it's not so much as Marcia was questioning whether Moses's sons, were given a role. The last phrases in the Torah talk about never again did there arise anyone who was as great as Moses. Yeah, he was untouchable. He's legendary. And so there's no expectation that anyone would be able to fill his shoes. So when Joshua is appointed, he's filled with a spirit of insight, but also he's recognized for his valor and his gallantry, his bravery. Not so much for being, Joshua's never called like. Rabbi Miri said a Navi. Joshua was never referred to as a prophet, whatever. So Moses is, the one guy who had this very special relationship with God, and it's not that no one else can try. It's that historically, from Jewish point of view, no one else has ever been able to achieve it. We're all encouraged to try to have that kind of relationship with God. But the line of Aaron is a different kind of, as we were saying before, it's to serve me. It's not to know me. Moses was commanded to
There's
know
a big
me,
difference.
right, and represent me. Aaron and his sons are told to serve me.
Right. So
I
yes,
think, Rabbi Norman, I think you use a word that came to my mind regarding, again, the story of our people, that you say the word Moshe was legendary, which it was like a mythological rather than what's the word, useful, or that does a role in the establishment. And I just was, I'm going to do it. It's difficult when you know the future, and I'm not a prophet, when you know the future of the issues about Israel, that just like as Marcia said, there is a problem. Who is the Kohen Gadol? Who's the high priest in our history? And by that time, we can call it history. That, is it the kids of Aaron? Is it the kids of someone else? So, and they fight. But the word legendary, I just love because of the source of the word.
So we could expand on that a little bit. Just like all successfully prominent people, there are a lot of different stories that find their attachment to that famous person. You have stories about Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, and but they don't really detract. They just show they exemplified certain traits.
Are you implying that they're
stories
not
are based
true?
on that? Excuse me?
Dr. Cohn, are you implying that they're not true?
No, the basic person is true, but the little stories are really examples of their character rather than.
Don't burst my bubble.
No, but that's what
Well, he never
happens.
lied. What was it, Washington? He never lied.
Right.
And
Cherry tree,
Yeah.
chop down
I
the
don't
cherry
know
tree.
that
So
story. The cherry.
he was more truthful than others, but more doesn't
Yeah.
mean he was the
Well, that's
only
like
one.
that's the description of Noah,
That's
right?
right.
Noah was
He's
righteous, but only in
Torah.
his
Yeah.
generation.
That's right. So we have different stories that find their attachment to it as examples of behavior, things like that, and more often than not, they can attribute it to that person. Yes, Michael.
It's their life story, how they got to that gold standard, if you will, how they achieved that legendary position, which I would say also the gold standard. One, only one of a kind, and it's their life. How did they get there? Which is really what we have to look at. How did they achieve that? And it started very early on in their life. And I would also say it had to have a little luck. People have to have some luck in achieving that, because there are people on the way getting there would try to stop them or discourage them or whatever. So it's a real story on how they got there. That's what I think that we have to look at also.
I'm reminded of the legend of Daniel Boone. Okay, and they made a song about, his being born on a mountaintop in Tennessee, and the whole story that goes along with that does not quite jive with what we know about Daniel Boone historically. Okay, but for kids, they have to understand he's prominent in our history, and so we have to look at it from that standpoint. But here in Torah, there are times when it's very specific, and times when it's very allegorical.
Marty, if we think about it, today we have societies that really the children inherit the role of the king or even the president in other places. Yeah, we have now King Charles, even in the Western, but in many other societies, they're not democracies that you select, but you inherit the role of the top.
Sure. And like you see in all of the movies about the English royalty, the legend about them exists, and it'll be, and many times it's quoted rather than the actual story about the actual biography about the person. So it's just it's interesting how literature progresses.
Well, Marty, I'm also thinking of, though the same words that you said to me seem to apply to Davy Crockett.
Right.
Yeah.
Because did he really patch
Johnny
up the
that
crack in the
planted
Liberty
the
Bell?
apples? Yeah.
Very good. Yes, it was Davy Crockett, not Daniel Boone. It was, but we have legendary stories about Daniel Boone too. But Davy Crockett, yes, thank you, David. Another David. Well, now we're on Exodus 29 and verse 1. If somebody,
I think I'm ready to read again.
Okay, please.
And this is the thing that thou shalt do unto them, to hallow them, to minister unto me in the priest's office. Take one young bullock and 2 rams without blemish, and unleavened bread, and cakes unleavened mingled with oil, and waters unleavened spread with oil of fine wheaten flour, shalt thou make them. And thou shalt put them into one basket and bring them in the blanket with the bullock and the 2 rams. And Aaron and his sons thou shalt bring unto the door of the tent of meeting, and shalt wash them with water. And thou shalt take the garments and put upon Aaron the tunic and the robe of the ephod and the ephod into the breastplate, and gird them with the skillfully woven hand of the ephod. And thou shalt set the meter upon his head, and put the holy crown upon that meter. Then thou shalt take the anointing oil and pour it upon his head and anoint him. And thou shalt bring his sons and put tunics upon them, and thou shalt gird them with girdles, Aaron and his sons, and bind head tires with them, and they shall leave the priesthood by a perpetual statute, and thou shalt consecrate Aaron and his sons.
Okay. They shall, basically, yes, we'll stop at verse 9, the end of verse 9. Any comments about this? Any comments about, what's, yes, Don?
Yeah, I am, just to jump out of this section, I am struck by the parallels here between the preparation, the elaborate preparation for sacrifice, and the instructions on how to bake wafers. And we know we're going to get blood real soon. With the Catholic services, in which wine is substituted for blood, but the wafers still exist, and then the sacrifice is no longer a living mammal, but what the Christians, Catholics consider the final sacrifice of the human being. So this is especially interesting to me because we can see that parallel. We see the transition from what we're just about to witness to current practice.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, here again, the issue of the language. What's interesting that when you read the translation wafer, in Hivrit is matzot, matzah, matzot, which is an interesting concept, and we know how it's made these days. The other thing that comes to my mind is the issue of unblemished, the issue of finding something that doesn't have any spot, something rotten, anything sick, unblemished. So that's what you bring, and I think that we have to recall this because, well, never mind. So that's drew my attention.
Okay. In a more modern era, I know my parents would dress up with coat and tie. Everything would be very neatly done, and then they would go to the shul for services. It reminds me of this, that it's not just, it's something special. It's not just for the priest, but maybe it's a way of showing a degree of respect to a higher order. My generation, it starts to change. And it's not so much, I've been to a lot of different places where people don't even wear shoes coming into the temple. Or they will wear clothing that is worn on the streets as opposed to a special occasion. And I don't know if part of this is I don't know if and I hate to use the word, but the commoners, the rest of the population of Israel, if they too dressed up in their finery, or if it was just the priesthood, okay, that was dressed in finery. Yes, Rabbi.
To the best of my knowledge, what I have learned, the answer for at this time in the people's history, no, they did not get dressed up for any special occasion. Okay.
Okay.
Later on, certainly into the Middle Ages, yes, the whole thing changed, and yes, we have to dress up for Shabbat to welcome the Queen, and we get dressed up and things like that. Now, whether that was something that developed innately, or whether that was to copy what the Christian world was doing, I don't know. But I'm not aware of any indication that at this point there were special vestments or any kind of a tradition or custom of the people dressing up. They would cleanse themselves, they would purify themselves, yes, but not necessarily to put on their nicer clothes or their Friday night sandals as opposed to their regular weekday sandals.
Okay, as part of that cleansing themselves, this is sort of like a mikveh ritual
Yes,
for the priests.
even if it was only symbolic.
Right.
Yeah. What comes to my mind also is that when we say here rituals unblemished, there are other things that need to be unblemished for the Kohen, for the Kohanim these days. I mean, they cannot get into a cemetery.
Right.
And they cannot marry a divorced woman, as far as I know. That kind of cleanliness, or what they call cleanliness, still today is respected and done.
Yes. Some people who have gone to various funerals, in the Jewish tradition, there is often a bowl of water to cleanse their hands. There's a lot of other symbolism that's in literature, but yes, it's sort of like trying to purify so I don't bring anything bad into the home. Or the temple, or wherever that ritual will occur. Yes, Don.
Yeah, I'm so hooked into this study. I probably spend 2-3 hours a day reading and researching. So, but one thing I realized this past week is that with all the commandments for these procedures, the actual observance and practice of these rituals from Exodus and Leviticus were not, there's no record of them being done by the Hebrew people earlier than about 200 BCE. So it's only like 200 years, 300 before the destruction of the Second Temple, that even there's no archaeological record. The only things that were discovered were ritual bathing, dietary laws, when they were using chalk, started using chalk containers, so there was no residual left in the containers. None of that there's no record of it prior to about 200 BCE. So what we're reading now, though, was commanded, what, 1,000 years before then? So what did people do for the 1,000 years in between? Or has the record just not been discovered? It's just I keep
Okay, I'd have to pass that over to the rabbis because I don't know the exact answer to that. I know about the oral tradition. I know about the oral Hebrew, let's say, and then the Proto-Hebrew, and then it being the language being oh God, my mind is not functioning well today. It starts with the letter A, the language of the spoken by the people around in
Amharic?
excuse me?
Aramaic.
Akkadian?
Yes. What the rabbi just
Akkadian.
not Akkadian. That's
Aramaic.
Aramaic.
Thank you, Aramaic. Because
Aramaic is right. Okay.
and so
No, but
there are a lot of different Aramaic languages, and then you sort of have like a convention that comes along later, and they decide on Neo-Hebrew, if you will. Yes.
well, it's not so much the different strains of Aramaic. It's the going back to the word that we were talking about before. It's the Proto-Semitic,
Right.
the Proto-Semitic languages from which Arabic and Syriac and Akkadian and Hebrew all
Right.
developed. So the Proto-Semitic is the earlier. But looking to Don's question, I mean, we'd have to ask the archaeologists, if indeed there have been things that would find that would, clarify things like that. There are some. I mean, I had a couple professors who said that it's only as of the 4th or 5th century BCE that these kind of descriptions are imposed upon. Same kind of thing you were talking about, whether it's George Washington or Daniel Boone or Davy Crockett, whatever. That, well, this is what we assume that they did. So let's give it authenticity by saying this is what God commanded. This is what we picture. This is how we envision what the people did, given some of the oral tradition that's been handed down. We have this name of a mitznefet. Well, what would a mitznefet mean? And stuff like that. Where did the word come from? And they would try to look at the etymology and figure it out and say, oh, that must have been some kind of a covering. Was it the head covering? Was it a chest covering? What did they need to? The priest wasn't one who went into battle, so it wouldn't be more of a shield. It would be some kind of an identifying uniform, etc. And they work with it that way. But I don't have a good answer either to as when exactly these kinds of things might have been in place. But we do know that as of the Mishnaic times, yes, they were well enough known and acknowledged for people to refer to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don, two things. First, I strongly recommend that you read the book by Elliot Friedman called Who Wrote the Bible?
I have
Then
read
he
it.
has
I have read it.
yeah. So he talks a lot about things that happened and didn't happen. And I'm coming back to Mary's thinking of the Torah, not after the Torah, that the Torah is a story. It's not history, but is a story. And so things that happen in the future are put here. And Marty, I'm not talking about people that come out of the cemetery washing their hands. I'm talking because there is a phrase, מה לכהן בבית הקברות, what this guy is doing in the בית הקברות, in the cemetery, because the Kohanim do not go, period, to the cemetery. So it became a phrase to say, what does, I don't know, what does this person doing in this place? What is Marty doing in Torah study? It's kind of a contradiction right there. But a really unusual placement of a person. So it's period that they don't go in, and there are laws that come up about all the restrictions that they have about life altogether. And even today, when we talk, are you a descendant of a Kohen? You have to do certain things, even in synagogue. In synagogue, they are the first to go as Aliyah and so forth. Another modern thing is that they could not find the DNA of all of us, in the research, but they could find descendants of Kohen, of Kohanim, that it went on very, 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 very long ago. So it's interesting things, and as Rabbi Norman said, archaeologists and historians and so forth can help us a little bit to understand things.
I hear you, Rabbi Nur, and thanks. But what struck me, though, was the fact that the actual practice of Judaism was only from about 200 BCE to when the Second Temple was destroyed in AD 70. So it's only about the age of the United States. So the actual practice of Judaism, as we're reading, only lasted about 300 years. And I was just, in fact, reading a research paper on the DNA markers of Cohen descendants, and actually it's been debunked now. There are no markers can be identified, genetic markers that distinguish. Sorry, Mark, but there are none that can be distinguished. The other markers.
Don, I'm confused at the statement you were making about that Judaism was only about as old as the United States. I didn't catch what you meant by that.
Oh, well, we mark our year to about 5,700 and change.
Well, that's an arbitrary number, but okay,
right,
go ahead.
Right, but looking at the archaeological record and the Torah and the accompanying texts, it looks like the actual practice of Judaism, with dietary laws and various rituals and commandments, really only lasted from about 200 BCE to the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. So about 300 years before then, and after that, then the rabbinical traditions took over.
So, but what are you defining as the practice of Judaism? You mean the biblical expression as what we're describing here?
Exactly, as what we're reading right now. Those commandments were only executed for about 300 years before the Second Temple was destroyed, and then we went on to the.
Well, no, they were the assumption is, and they've found some relics is that it was practiced in Solomon's temple too, from approximately 1000 until 586.
But I'm not seeing that though. I'm such a novice here that I'm sure I'm just not
Well,
looking.
there are things that they have found. I mean, there's also a great deal of criticism and hesitancy in generalizing from it, but there's certainly things that they have found that would authenticate some practice, whether it was exactly as described in the text as we have it, probably not. But there were some of these practices that were there. Yeah.
Okay. But as for getting close to the letter of the law, it looks like it was a long time after that it became serious.
Yeah. Well, and some people would say that's intentional by definition, that so many of these mitzvot and commandments and injunctions were to be performed only by the priests. And since the number of priests was dwindling and dwindling and dwindling, there were, fewer and fewer and fewer who actually could perform it. But anyway,
So I'm gonna shut up now because I guess
Okay, Helene has her hand up. Yes.
One of the things, me, I have to tell you who I am. I have finally new hearing aids, and I don't like them. I like the old-fashioned ones. Technology is not my thing, and I'm trying to understand what everybody is saying, and it's too loud or it's too soft. But I'm getting the point about stories. What stories do we believe? What are our stories? The word stories jumped out at me because every family has children with different stories. Every story is personal. Every story is based on who you were, who were your relatives, and sometimes they fit and sometimes they don't fit. So I thank you for being here, and I'm sorry I couldn't add a lot because I'm still hearing myself like a stranger, but I send you my story is God, and God's word, I believe in rules. And when there's rules from God, I try to follow those rules, and it doesn't matter what my story is. That's what I believe. And I want to thank you for being here. You did me a lot of good.
Very good, Helene. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments? Well, let's something about the headdress dovetails into this. I was in my reading. I noticed the headdress was described on two separate occasions, different by Josephus. That the headdress covered a portion of the head, and then there were allusions made to the fact that it was something like a tiara, and then it was changed again by Josephus to a cloth that covered sort of like a turban. Okay, that covered the entire head. So this can be, differences of opinion can arise depending on which story you want to believe, just from Josephus' standpoint. And so it's okay, but we know they wore a headdress of some fashion. And the majority of people have said it covered the entire head, but you do have others that described it differently. Because maybe they weren't there. Maybe they weren't there at the time and they had to do more research.
Sure.
I don't know the answer. But I do know this. There's a difference in when we make criticisms of age and how long a belief system is in play. Those who strongly believe are going to say, this is the story of how the Israelites came into being. This is the story of how Judaism came into being, and we can trace a lineage. For those who believe, they need a place where they can come from. Everyone needs a place that they have come from. And when we deny the place where they can come from, we then deny their story. It's like saying chapters 1 through 10 in a novel don't count. And then you never know why people are behaving a certain way after that. So sometimes it takes a bit of faith that that is the way things are or have been, that we cannot prove something to the letter. I have this discussion constantly in my philosophy group too, not just with religion, but with everything we do. So, mathematics is based on faith. And all the original axioms, you don't prove axioms. You take them on faith that they're true. But see, today science can say, well, there's really no such thing as a straight line. And yet it has worked for us throughout the history of mankind, a straight line. So before we jump to saying and say that, oh, if the axioms are false, all of mathematics is false, we should be careful when we speak about ancient religions. We can talk about Buddhism. We can talk about Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity. They have a beginning and future. Some things we have to take on faith. Okay, not just a fact. And we have to be very careful when we do that, because when we do that to anyone else, we're denying part of their own raison d'etre. Yes, Grace, please.
Good morning. Thank you,
Good morning.
everyone. You mentioned that word faith, and I have a statement in a pamphlet that I hold dear. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
Right.
I like that. You know, for me, it makes sense. It's something that you feel. I believe it's emotional, where you can be connected. Sorry, I don't know that one. By faith.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. So I just feel that we have to be careful when we, when we look for evidence. That every culture has not had any. They do not have evidence for their faith. Faith is a different realm. Okay. That's all. That's enough about that. Anyway, what about so the headdress we discussed and lined turbans around them? But okay, to use the sashes, and these will be symbolisms of priesthood. Okay, and now we're going to talk about the ordination. of the priesthood. So if David or anyone else, if they would like to read verse 10 through 18.
Okay, I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
Okay, and thou shalt bring the bullock before the tent of meeting, and Aaron and his sons shall lay their hands upon the head of the bullock. And thou shalt kill the bullock before the Lord at the door of the tent of meeting. And thou shalt take of the blood of the bullock and put it upon the horns of the altar, which they finger with thy finger. And thou shalt pour out all the remaining blood at the base of the altar. And thou shalt take all of the fat that covereth the innards, and the lobe above the liver, and the two kidneys, and the fat that is upon them, and make them smoke upon the altar. But the flesh of the bullock and its skin and its dung shalt thou burn with fire without the camp. It is a sin offering. Thou shalt also take the one ram, and Aaron and his sons shall lay their hands upon the head of the ram. And thou shalt then slay the ram, and thou shalt take the blood and dash it about against the altar. And thou shalt cut the ram into its pieces, and wash its innards and its legs, and put them with its pieces and with its head. And thou shalt make the whole ram smoke upon the altar. It is a burnt offering unto the Lord. It is a sweet savor, an offering made by fire unto the Lord.
Okay. Any comments about this?
No wonder people are vegetarian.
Yeah, it is very descriptive, very descriptive. Yes, Don.
Well, in today's light, it's very barbaric. But my question is, what purpose did it serve?
Okay, what's the role of blood? Let's reframe the question. What's the role of blood? Why blood?
A symbol of life.
Very
Right.
good.
Yeah.
And
Well, you can get blood without slaughtering the creature.
yeah, you're going to have blood. That's right. But what about the blood? And why at the foot of the altar? Yes, Grace.
Is it possibly to cleanse when blood is released? Say you get a cut and you gotta let it bleed a little bit so that any way that you had gotten the cut, it needs to kind of cleanse itself before it can heal. Another symbolic, perhaps, maybe.
I don't know. But the blood does return to the earth. And other things, but it I think David comes close to it when it's a symbol of life. But it is, I have a hard time picturing this. To have blood on a finger, to have blood on an ear, and doing it on the altar. I personally have a lot of difficulties in understanding all of this as to why this needs to be done. This is Don's question. Any other discussions in other Jewish literature that I just haven't read. Yes, Rabbi.
I would only say that this is not the way that rabbis are ordained today. I mean, it's the same term. It's the same Hebrew term, smicha, but it's not. That's not the ceremony that we do anymore. Thankfully.
The culinary class is optional now.
the, but why the laying on of the hands onto the bull's head while all this is being done?
Don, I don't know what research you have done, but I think that if we look at other tribes, not the Israeli tribes, at that time or even before, it's something that was done. And I think that we create rituals for some purpose. I mean, it's a ritual that the woman of the house blesses the candles. It's a ritual that I mean, we have rituals, and rituals are very, very important to our lives. But I believe that this kind of ritual was performed for many other tribes at that time. And, you know, we think that we are very original and we invented everything, but it's not the case.
I would go a little further answering my own question, Reverend Mary. Thank you. I just think that mobs are bloodthirsty, and you know that a blood ritual defuses the tendency of people to take their own vengeance. I mean, look at the French Revolution and the guillotine and Kristallnacht. Mobs go crazy. You know, mobs want blood, and I can understand how sacrificing a ram would would wind down the impulse of mobs to do it themselves. You know, I kind of understand what's going on here, and I don't think people would change that much. I mean, we see it even today. As soon as you get a crowd of people together, they want blood. So, bullfights, for example.
Any comments about that the slaughter should only occur at the entrance of the tent of meeting, not within the tent of meeting?
I think that we have to remember that the family of Aaron that becomes that's the Levites, they didn't have land to grow anything, they didn't have animals, and the sacrifice meat, that's what we cut outside the tent, was their nourishment. I don't know, maybe because it's not a ritual to cut meat and give it to someone to eat. The ritual was more with the blood and the killing. So perhaps that kind of butchery is more for the practical issue. I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to call on Roseanne first.
Well, Susan had her hand up before.
Oh, I didn't
then I'll-
see it. I apologize.
Yeah,
I
and then I
apologize.
took it down when you asked your question, because
Oh, I'm
I didn't
sorry.
want to comment on your question. All I wanted to say was, for most of what we've been reading, as a Christian, I can see the references to Yeshua. And I don't bring it up because this is a Torah study, not a Christian study. But I have to say, these last few verses, I'm just at a loss as to how they would relate to
to Yeshua. I mean, I mean, we're all struggling with this, and
Sure,
I too am struggling with it.
sure, for different reasons.
Right,
Yeah.
for different reasons, but still,
right.
still the struggle is there.
Yeah. Any other?
Yeah. Yeah, Marty, I was just going to say, it was kind of like what Mary was saying, but this is a little different. Most of the places, the sacrifices are, yeah, then consumed by the people. So it kind of makes sense. You know, it's like God's not telling them to waste what would have been food normally anyhow. But in these particular cases, it sounds like they're being asked to burn these things, the sacrifices up in total. So they're not being consumed. So it really seems to be a waste. I mean, the Kohanim, the Levites are still going hungry after all these animals have been slaughtered. So why, you know, it just makes no sense compared to the other sacrifices.
So why the liver? Grace, did you have something you were going to ask?
Yes.
First?
So these animals are without blemish, right? They're like
Yeah.
this perfect. That's got to be pretty few and far in between, wouldn't you think?
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if it's perhaps God's way of introducing us to the notion that it's rare. It's a very rare type of situation where you're going to find this, because we're all blemished, right? As human, different tribes, different, you know, cultures that do things. So I'm wondering, you know, I don't know. I really, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just tying that into it, that, you know, there's can't be a whole lot of bull and lamb that are without a blemish.
Okay, now before I call it back on Ruth Ann, the rabbi had his hand up before too, and I'm not sure which part of the discussion, if it's
Well,
an earlier discussion or what.
primarily from Don's allusion about the thirst for blood, and then also to what Grace was saying too. But my impression is that this was not a big public display.
Right.
This only happened once. Granted, it was spread over 7-8 days, but it only happened once. This was not repeated for the next generation of priests, and then Aaron's grandsons, and then the grandsons after that. But this was just the very first time, and I see it more as a very private kind of ceremony, only at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and it was not a big public spectacle at all. It was a private moment, and again, I have no basis for finding a biblical allusion to it, but going back now, you know, coming close to 50 years ago, our ordination as rabbis not only included the big public ceremony with the laying on of hands from the Rosh Yeshiva, from the head of the seminary, but also a more private ceremony, just of the leadership. Family wasn't even invited, just the leadership and our classmates, where literally we all participated in a ceremony of helping to bless each other and sharing in a moment of consecration. And I don't know whether whoever defined that pattern for the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, I don't know whether they were thinking back to this kind of a thing or not. But again, in reading this, and yes, with all the detail and And then you asked about why is it at the tent of meeting, and is it because that's as close. I mean, last week I was with people in Jerusalem, and we were telling them, well, this is as close as you can actually physically get to the where scholars tell us the Holy of Holies would have been in Jerusalem. And I see this as being the same thing as Aaron was the only person who was allowed to go all the way into the Holy of Holies, all the way into the presence in Aaron and Moses, but the other priests could get to the entrance, but not come all the way inside, and that's where the ceremony would take place.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. This laying on of the hands, what is the word for rabbinic ordination?
Semicha. The
Semicha.
verb is lismoch, that he samach, he placed his hands on him.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's
Also closeness.
and
Move.
so I just thought that it's any relationship to simcha.
No,
No,
no. It's
Very good.
there are two S's in
that's
Hebrew.
what I thought.
Right,
Okay.
right. And there are two chuz also. And both of them are different, right?
Very good.
But the one that's close is closeness. Samuch.
Yeah,
So-
samuch,
Okay.
right. Just like karov and that is to come close is also to offer the sacrifice.
Right,
Very
right.
good.
I don't know when Jeremiah lived. Maybe Don knows. Because at one time, I think it's Jeremiah or not Isaiah, or said, I'm fed up with your sacrifices. I don't want sacrifices. God is speaking through the prophet. I want you to behave nicely and so forth. So I'm wondering until when sacrifices still existed or they are used as a metaphor, I'm not sure. But as we talk about prophets and in the story, which is not in the Torah.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, Suzanne?
Yeah, in response to Grace, this comment about without blemish, to my viewpoint, that's a representation of Yeshua, that he had to be, well, instead of blemish, we would say without sin, and in order for the crucifixion to work. So seeing all these references in the Torah and elsewhere in scripture, to me, that's just underscoring the importance of for those of us who believe about the Messiah, that Yeshua is the Messiah, the importance of him being without sin. And
Okay.
I know it's a different viewpoint, but
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Roseanne?
No, Marty, I was just going to say part of our problem now is that we don't know how they defined without blemish back then. I mean, it could be, like right now, if you have a herd of spotted cows and you get one that's a solid color, we might call it, without blemish. But what if it was the spotted cows that they thought were without blemish? I mean, we don't know.
Sure.
So
It's a good point. That, by the way, the same discussion is going to come up later on with the red heifers.
yeah, that's well defined.
Yeah.
What is clear, given the verbiage, is that they're talking of cosmetic.
Yes.
They're not talking about a physical handicap
Right.
of the animal. It's only cosmetic.
Or would it have just been the best of the herd? Would
No.
that have been sufficient?
No,
It wouldn't.
no.
Suppose-
Again, there's different terminology for the choicest.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah,
Don.
and when you bring fruit, you have to bring the first fruits of
Fruit.
your
Yeah.
trees. So there is a definition there.
Sure.
Sorry, Don, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm so listening to what everybody is saying here. But one contradiction that just occurred to me is that the emphasis through all through the Torah is the purity of bloodline. You know, that they're traceable going back to Adam. But with animals that are without blemish, what it doesn't say is whether they've been bred before they're sacrificed, because to be consistent with the notion of pure bloodlines, you would think that if you find a perfect animal, you'd want to breed it rather than kill it. But we never know from reading the text whether any of these perfect animals have been bred at all. I don't know if anybody's ever addressed that question, but
Oh, that's
No.
interesting.
An interesting, perspective on it, right?
Mhm.
So what about the liver? Why didn't they just say the innards? Okay, why? But specifically, they point out the liver and kidneys and like that.
And the protuberance on the
the
liver.
protuberance of the liver.
Okay, doctor, what are we talking about?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if they understood that these are the two organs that cleanse our blood continuously,
Oh.
day in and day out. I do not know if they knew that at that time, but that's their function. But something more, the liver, I know, was used for divination in some circles. So is getting rid of these a way of separating? We're talking about dung and divination and other things that we have learned we don't want to. This is stuff we don't want around us. And yet people use certain things to divine the future. What's going to happen? Is this another comment on that? Or is it a way of just purifying the body? Because this here is very specific about burning it outside the camp, outside the tent of the meeting, I should say, and destroying it so it's just up in smoke. Doesn't say anything about the ashes, but turn it into smoke.
Mhm.
Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, I had also heard about the divination.
Okay.
Divination notice, specifically identifying those parts of the carcass that could be that other peoples would be using, and then somebody, and I don't know the difference because I don't do that much barbecuing, but somebody also said that there's different aroma that comes
Mhm.
from different parts of the body when
Oh, yeah.
and that the mixture provides a more pleasing aroma. I don't know.
Okay. I don't know the answers to this, but it's just interesting to see that other people have commented on these things. Any?
Rabbi Norman, I put something in the chat when you have time.
I will look. Oh, I don't see it.
Well, keep going, Marty. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mary. I don't see it. Maybe you should send it again.
Okay.
So anyway, Now, David or anyone else, if they would read verses 15, well, we did read through 18. Now we're turning to a ram, and the ram is going to be slaughtered, and again the blood is going to, and then turn all of the ram into smoke upon the altar as a burnt offering to the Lord, and
Well,
goes
David
into.
could read this if you want.
But any ideas come to mind as to why bulls and rams?
Well, astrologically, the ram and the bull are signs of the zodiac. They are constellations in the night sky. Also a very ancient tradition.
Okay.
Aries and Taurus.
Okay, yes. Any other comments? What does the bull and ram, when you think of a bull and a ram, what comes to mind? Strength,
Fine. No.
power. Okay. Yes, Ruth Ann.
I was just gonna also say, and rams and bulls can't give birth.
That's true.
So, you know, if you sacrifice the male, okay, you have other males around, you can still breed your flock, your cattle, whatever. But if you start sacrificing the females, you're going to have more problems because,
Sure.
I mean, still the gestation period of any mammal is quite long.
Good point. Good points. But I just found, you know, that the male. Another question that I have, I don't have an answer for it, or I haven't seen anything on it, but there may yet be something written. What about the significance of the horns? You know, being holier than the animal. You know, the blood is they're being anointed in a way with the blood on the horns on the ark, the horns of the ark. Some of that blood is going to be transferred to the ark. Any ideas about that? I don't know. Is there anything written in the literature about that? Any symbolism? You know, ram's horn, shofar, yeah. But is there any relationship here? I just don't know why it singles out the detail. There are certain areas in Torah that have a lot of detail, and this is one of them. But why, you know, the ears, is that supposed to be symbolic of something? I just
Maybe-
don't know. I just
maybe,
don't know.
right.
So I just something just crossed my mind. The ear is used for hearing. Does that have anything to do?
And the horns are used for sounding.
Yes. So I don't know if there's anything.
My understanding is that when you burn, no, the word I don't remember. When you burn the body, what's
Cremate.
the only thing that's remain is the bones. It's not anything else. So maybe that was something, I don't know. That was my understanding by not burning the body. Please help me. What do we do with the body instead of burying it?
Cremation.
Cremated. That in the cremation, what's left, that whatever they give you, that's from the bones. It's not from the rest of the body.
That's interesting. But I just find it, these are curious questions that I don't know if we can answer. And by the way, if anybody has ever had to help with an urn with all the ashes, quite heavy. It's not light. Okay, those ashes are quite heavy. Fortunately, they don't weigh as much as the person because other things are lost. But the remains, I don't want to go into the chemistry or anything like that. That it is still a hefty weight there. And Ricky, thank you for joining.
Well, I just woke up. My sleep has been so crazy. 2 naps a day, and the first nap I just woke up from.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been around somewhat.
Okay. Good. Yes, Rabbi.
Marty, there's it's not about the horns, but it's about with the ear and the toe and all
Yes.
that. There's a midrash that's included in the Eitz Chaim thing about.
Oh, okay.
Let me just summarize it very quickly. The midrash understands the anointing of ear, thumb, and big toe as teaching that a Kohen must listen to the people, act on their behalf, and go forth, walk faithfully. That's Ricky's favorite line from
Yes.
Micah. And another midrash
Walk
sees the
humbly.
ceremony as helping Aaron atone for his role in the incident of the golden calf. Quote, "The ear that heard the words of God, you shall have no other gods beside me, and then listened to the people's demand for a calf. The hands which had pledged to serve God and then fashioned the calf, and the feet that climbed Mount Sinai and then hastened to do that which was wrong." All of those had to participate or be included in the cleansing symbolic ceremony.
Interesting.
Doesn't answer the
Okay.
horns, though,
Right.
because contrary to Michelangelo, Jews don't have horns.
Right. Hate to disappoint him.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Don.
This is not really relevant. We're talking about the bones left over after cremation. They're also incredibly electrostatic. I got involved in maybe starting a aerial cremains dispersal, shooting the cremain. Some people want to disperse their bones over the ocean or over the mountains. But we try to eject the cremains out of a little airplane. It sticks to everything, doesn't go away. Sticks to the plane, it comes back in the window, it sticks to the tire.
Oh, lovely.
You can't ever clean it up.
Thanks for the image.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments?
Well, since we haven't yet read the verse 19, even though we've discussed it,
Okay, please.
excuse me, shall I read it for you?
Please.
Okay, and thou shalt make the whole ram smoke upon the altar. It is a burnt offering unto the Lord. It is a sweet savor, an offering made by fire unto the Lord. And thou shalt take the other ram, and Aaron and his sons shall lay their hands upon the head of the ram.
Okay.
I was just thinking we should read it
we
since
sort of
we've
jumped
already been
ahead.
discussing
Yes,
it.
David. Thank you. Thank you. All of this dovetails into the descriptions. We ran on ahead in our discussions of for verse 18. What would you like to? Let me see. Well, we can't go any further. We can't go any further. There's